Hey guys, this is Lance and Matt, and you're listening to Project Offbeat, a podcast that helps you explore careers outside your usual corporate setup. Lance, before I get to our offbeaten career for today, I think you have a little backstory that you want to share with our audience, no?
Matt, I am very excited for our episode today. He is a renowned guy that I know from before. He is noong time pa natin sa Ateneo, no, sa Celadon. He's like one of the founders
Mm-mm.
of that historical organization in Ateneo. And we
The
also studied
founder.
the
Mm-mm.
founder,
The
tama, the
founder.
founder of that organization in Ateneo. And he's also in the same high school as me in Grace Christian College, no? So
Small
he is
world.
this one of these most esteemed graduates and alumni of Grace Christian College. Besides that, Matt, kilala rin siya ng tatay ko, kilala rin siya ng nanay ko. I think everyone knows this guy from top to bottom just because of, everything that he is as a person. Matt, I can't wait, no, for our episode today. Sure ako jam-packed ang episode natin today.
Well, I'm sure our listeners are excited as well. Let's get it started. In today's episode, we're featuring an offbeaten career that deep dives into the complicated and ever-changing world of geopolitics and economics and what it takes to put all of these into writing
Our,
for a major newspaper outlet.
our speaker for today is an economic, political analyst, and columnist in the Philippine Star, a winner of a record 15 Catholic Mass Media Awards, thus far the highest number of awards ever, and 3 Don Carlos Palanca Literary Awards. So medyo big time to, no? You could see from this heavy resume, he is also the founder of the legendary 83-year-old treasure in Quezon City, the Kamuning Bakery, where he holds the occasional forums as he brings guests all around town to his bakery to interview them. Napaka off-beaten career, baker na, columnist pa, he's an educator as well, and of course, he's an advocate of the Chinese-Filipino culture here in the Philippines.
Our guest today is Wilson Flores, the great mind and writer behind the Philstar column Will Soon Flourish. He joins the Project Offbeat today to talk about the challenging career of newspaper journalism, or being a columnist, basically. Good morning and welcome to the show, Uncle Wilson. Kamusta ka?
Good morning, Matt and Lance. Kamusta to both of you? Congrats to your interesting podcast.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
thank
thank you,
you.
thank you. We really
Yes.
appreciate it. But first off, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. Quick question
Yes.
though. Is there like a deeper story behind your column's name, Will Soon Flourish? Like aside from your play on words.
Thank you very much. Because it took me a long time to think of a nice name. I wanted a name for the column with a little humorous twist.
Mm-mm.
So I was able to find 3 English words that rhymes with Wilson Flores. Wilson Flores, ibig sabihin in Tagalog, malapit na mag-flourish. That's also that's also my email address. wilsonflores@gmail.com.
Uncle Wilson, hindi ko nakakalimutan yung email mo because Wilson Flourish is like the closest possible words towards Wilson Flores. So, memorize ko from the back of my mind yung email.
Thank you.
I
A lot of people would ask me, paano na yan if you're flourishing na? Sabi ko, even if a person is flourishing na, no matter what status, you have to have always humble effect. Kaya the name is always humble ang dating.
Ang ganda.
Tama.
Ang ganda.
Well, I guess in your perspective, in your humble words, can you kind of describe what your career as a newspaper columnist, what it entails, no? Can you describe it for our listeners?
Yes. Being a columnist, you have to always be abreast about everything, all topics. Kasi unlike other columnists are political columnists, so they just write puro politika lang. Election, politics, gobyerno. Some other columnists naman, mostly business columnists, so puro about economy, business, money, companies. Iba naman showbiz column. Showbiz column, chismis, marites about entertainment, news. In my case, I write about everything and anything, almost anything under the sun. Anything that is interesting to the readers. Unlike others, I don't write some columnists tend to write what they just want. They don't care what you want.
Mm-mm.
I like this topic. I want this. I ate this. This is my column. I prefer to write diverse topics, but topics that people would like to read about. You have to always be interested about any topic and almost everything. You have to always be knowledgeable. You have to always keep on reading a lot. And you have to talk to a lot of people if possible. Be curious, eternally curious.
Yung dito sa generation namin, Uncle Wilson, actually marami
Yes.
yung parang nagpi-freelance writers,
Yes.
contributing in mga blogs, no? Would you be able to tell us how is it different, being a freelance writer and the columnist for a renowned publication like the Philippine Star?
Thank you. The difference, I think, is in the case of a well-known, respected newspaper like Philippine Star, you don't just write and it comes out immediately. It has to go through the editorial process. There are editors na parang looking at, parang it's like quality control. If you are a fast food or a restaurant, somebody has to look over it, make sure it's correct, make sure it's nice, and they do the layout also for you. They do the nice layout, the whatever. So there's more effort and process than blogging and other forms of writing. The good thing about being a blogger naman and other forms of writing now, with social media, everybody can be a newspaper, everybody can be a columnist on their own, is you have the instant freedom and instantaneous access to the public. The advantage naman of being columnist with a well-known newspaper, the credibility and fame of the newspaper somehow rubs off on you. People will say, Wilson, mas credible yan or something. And somehow there's an advantage. They presume you know a lot. They presume you are very good.
Although,
Somehow.
Uncle Wilson, ngayon parang yung mga newspaper outlets or sometimes it's being challenged for being biased towards a certain party.
I agree.
No?
I agree.
Merong ganyan ngayon, no?
That's a very good point. Not only in the Philippines, especially worldwide, even during the time of Trump, some politicians and some people believe, some very valid, some concerns are very valid, that mainstream media, we are considered mainstream media, the newspapers, the major TV networks, some accuse or complain about mainstream media as bias or favoring a certain way of thinking. That is a challenge always for all people who are in mainstream media. All columnists, we have to always reassess and always remind ourselves to be not biased, if possible. The good thing about Philippine Star, in fairness to the newspaper, it has a better reputation, I believe, than other mainstream media. It has a good reputation as generally very fair and balanced and first-rate journalism. And personally, kasi I like to read Philippine Star, so I started actually writing for them when I was in college at Ateneo.
Wow.
Alam mo, when I was in college, every week I had an article, not only in Philippine Star, but also in Philippine Daily Inquirer, Manila Bulletin, but mostly in Philippine Star. Every week, I have an article on all kinds of topics, like the way I write, whether it's a book review, movie review, feature article. I keep writing and writing. And then suddenly one day, the editors invited me to be a columnist, asked me to send over a picture. And it took me a long time to think of a name for the column. Kasi I keep thinking and thinking a long time. It took me a few years before coming out with. Yes, took me a few years to come out with Will Soon Flourish.
And I guess, can you enlighten us on how long this column has been going?
You'd be surprised. Are you 20 years old? I think you are 22, 23 years old.
Yeah, I'm 24. Matt is
I'm
20.
20. I just turned 26 actually, pero yeah.
26, almost as old as you.
Wow.
I think I started writing the column around year 2000, around that time. But before that, I was writing already. You do believe I was already writing in the 1980s. And actually, my first column, I just remember now because of your good questions. I was still in college at Ateneo. First year, second year, I was already writing a weekly column at Manila Chronicle. That was a well-known paper in the 1980s. Every Monday, I had a column called Roots of Philippine Business. It's all about history of Philippine business, families, all these entrepreneurs of the past. Basta ang cut-off date ko, everything before World War II. Everything before World War II, from the Spanish time up to World War II, anything about Philippine business, tycoons, entrepreneurs, I wrote about it every week for 2.5 years without fail. It was a hobby. And I remember, it's very fascinating. I love writing kasi.
Oh, well, imagine, Lance, if you're writing for that long, parang ito na yung literal baby niya, 'di ba?
Oo nga eh. Ang galing. I mean, the consistency without a miss, no? During the college days. Uncle Wilson, nung college kami, parang nagpa-party-party lang kami ni Matt eh. You were already establishing your
ito yung roots niya, kung bagay.
Ito yung roots eh.
Yeah.
Thank you. And also, I forgot to add, when I was in college, I was already writing a column also for the Gaidon college paper.
Of course.
Yes, of course.
I wrote a column.
Wow.
Not only Gaidon, I also wrote every issue of Matanglawin, the Filipino language paper.
Matanglawin is like one of our organization, a very nice organization right now, handling a lot of plays and publications. Grabe.
I even wrote. And Heights, I also wrote for Heights.
Wow!
Lahat na.
Sinimot ni Uncle Wilson ang lahat. Grabe.
I also wrote for sa Ateneo. Wala na eh. There was an association called Political Society of Ateneo.
Ooh.
I think it's no longer existent. I asked around. They had a journal called Icarus. It had a magazine called Icarus. I used to write for it also.
Right. Uncle Wilson, how do you have all of the energy? Sabi mo, you're not missing deadlines. You've been doing this for your column's been here for 22 years. And then Matt, he mentioned yung scope niya before World War II pa. And now he's conversing with us as if he's just up to date with everything that's going on.
And
how do you have the energy?
Tama. And when we did our research on, I guess even recently, from the 2000s, your work from the 2000s, it doesn't really stick to one. Of course, there's a lot of geopolitics and economy, but there's also a lot of there's also celebrity history and food as well. So parang
light topics.
So that got us wondering to ask you this question. Where do you get the energy? And I guess ikaw ba yung nagse-select kung ano yung mga topics that you will write about, etc.?
Yes, I select the topics. Only this pandemic I got a little delayed in some of my deadlines because you don't go around, you don't move around, you don't talk to people. But I enjoy talking to all kinds of people, and almost every topic to me is interesting. And I love to read. You have to love to read to be able to write well. I'm not saying I write very well. I just love writing. So I love reading and reading nonstop. All kinds of things, whether online, books, newspapers, magazines. I enjoy writing and reading. So it's fun for me. So it doesn't seem like work anymore always. You have to enjoy what you're doing somehow.
Ganda. Parang you don't need anyone pushing you. No, you are internally motivated to actually write about all of these things. Ganda.
You're correct. In fact, alam mo, in some of my interviews are so long. Alam mo, some of my Philippine Star interviews, some are 9,000 words, iba 6,000 words. Yes, I have some interviews. I remember I had an interview with the founder of Metrobank, George T. It was a very long interview, thousands of words. I remember another columnist of Philippine Star, it was Vic Agustin, called me up. Wilson, ikaw ba nag-transcribe? Sino nag-transcribe mo for all those words? Kasi di ba, it's a long interview, question and answer. You know naman, transcribing is a long process. It's a headache. You have to keep on rewinding the tape and whatever, di ba? So I go, no. I did everything by myself. Na-shock siya kasi it's a long process pa. The asking is another thing. The writing, aside from writing columns on all sorts of topics, one of my favorite styles of columns is exclusive interviews of fascinating people. From rebels to tycoons to movie stars. I was able to even interview years ago na natsambahan ko the wife of Arnold Schwarzenegger. She was a niece of John F. Kennedy. Si Maria Schreiber. Nakatsamba ko doon. Nagulat ang Philippine Star. Ano siya, pamangkin siya of the famous John F. Kennedy from that family. And at that time, she was First Lady of California. Nakatsamba ko mga all kinds of, nakatsamba. Like si Erap. When Erap was jailed for briefly in the hospital, I was the first to interview him. Nobody was allowed to interview him. I was allowed to interview him in the hospital. 3 oras, 3 hours. I did not bring a tape recorder. It was all kinds of paper lang. I wrote everything down. Danding kuhan ko, natsambahan ko, the tycoon, the boss of San Miguel. I saw him lang in a coffee shop. I had an appointment with someone, my cousin, it's another table. When I was walking, bigla nag-hi sa akin. Sabi niya, oy, Wilson, halika, mag-hi ka. He invited me to sit down and mag-hi sa kanya. I took all the napkin, yung napkin na tissue sa table.
Yung paper napkin.
Each one of them, humingi pa ako sa waitress. I wrote there lahat ng notes ko. I interviewed him for an exclusive interview. Nakachamba ako. All kinds of weird things. Like si Lucio Tanden, I was able to interview him from 6 p.m. up to 12 midnight. 6 hours. And that entire thing was in the newspaper. I think his first and only interview for media. All kinds. Even Joma Season.
Wow.
Yes. In Netherlands.
Yes.
I wrote about him a very, very long interview. I remember the movie actress, si Sharon Cuneta, even shared it sa social media niya. Very interesting.
Kami naman, Uncle Wilson, nakachamba kami sa'yo.
Yes.
Yes. I admire both of you. You are talented. And your parents, hi to them.
Thank you. Uncle Wilson, you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
Hilig mo yung parang writing about exclusive, interviews with the greatest personalities. Yes. Would you say that this is the number one topic or genre that you love writing about? Do you have any specific favorites, no? Or mga key pieces na alam mong you can write it about for 24 hours in a day?
Yes. Ako, anybody who is a leader, achiever, newsmaker is interesting for me. I write the interview kasi, it's very fascinating. It's very unique. You draw out people. Alam mo, always I interview people before I meet them. I do basic research lang, a little bit about them. Para when I meet them, I don't ask them things that I wouldn't miss. Alam mo, there is only one person na I forgot to research about. Maniwala ka. In all my years of writing about interesting people, the wealthiest man in Japan, the owner of this Uniqlo. Kasi hindi ako, this billionaire, US dollar billionaire na, alam mo, I'm not a fashion guy. I'm not a fashion type guy, so I don't know fashion brands. Before Uniqlo came to the Philippines, I did not even know what was Uniqlo. Talagang clueless ako. Tapos, I just got a letter from this company called Uniqlo from Japan daw. Wrote me a letter mga 2-3 months before the proposed interview. Sabi niya, they had this president daw of this company. Is it okay to request for an interview daw, me to interview their presidente? May biodata pa. Tapos, sabi ko sa secretary ko, lagay mo lang yan sa appointment book. I will decide na lang on that day if I have time to go there and have an interview kasi akala ko walang kwenta. Just another executive of a Japanese firm na unknown. Tapos, chamba, at that time, I was teaching at La Consolacion College, Manila. The nuns, the Augustinian nuns there invited me to teach. So after class, I came out around 5 or 6 o'clock na in Mediola area, Manila yun, near your school.
Yes.
So when I came out, sabi ko sa driver ko, ano next appointment natin? Sir, ito daw, may interview ka daw. Saan? Yan sa Mall of Asia. Hindi naman malayo 6 o'clock naman tama. Sige, doon ako makidinner. At sinaulo ko, no? I did not even know who that guy was and who Uniqlo was. Tapos when I went there, I went up the escalator. It was like second floor of the Mall of Asia.
Ito
It
pa
was
yung
a
flagship
huge
store. Oo,
Yes,
ito
it was
yung...
a huge store. It was a huge store na nobody inside except the staff lang, no customers ha. Puro staff lang and several young guys and women, naka-coat and tie lahat. And then there was this short Japanese guy nandun with one seat, ako one seat, and there was this Japanese interpreter. Sabi ko, parang hari to, ano pa to? Parang, at as na-realize ko, hindi pa open that store. That one day before the opening, they invited me to interview him.
That's a
So I
huge
went
interview.
in without knowing what is Uniqlo, who that guy was. So when I sat down, I just kept on asking all kinds of usual questions. Then in the middle of question, tinanong ko, how did you go into this business? Tapos tumawa siya. Sabi niya, hindi, sabi ko, kasi I inherited this formal suit business from my father. And then I just went into it and changed the format. So na-realize ko, ay, siya pala may-ari, hindi pala siya manager ng company.
Hala.
He seems to be the owner. Tapos sabi ko, oh by the way, how big is your sales? Akala ko ordinary company, di ba? Tapos minention niya, my sales every year is how many $1 billion? Una, shock ako. I didn't know I'm a billionaire. At tapos what was, sabi ko, why did I not research about this? Tapos I suddenly became more serious and started asking. Alam mo, after that interview, everything was finished. I went home and everything. Alam mo, I researched him. I Googled him immediately. Alam mo, the Economist magazine of London had to write him, his office, like 6 months, 7 months, to get an interview to fly from London to Tokyo to interview him.
Wow.
And I almost did not even show up. Alam mo yan?
Wow.
Tapos, alam mo, luckily, I was the only person who was able to interview him that time.
Uncle Wilson,
Ang galing.
question.
Mga funny stories.
Parang, what do you think did Uniqlo see in you na sila pa mismo ang lumapit para
With a
i-interviewin mo
letter.
sila?
With a
Exactly.
nice formal letter.
With a letter, di ba? Parang,
maybe they think I write in a nice way that would bring out the person or something. Even some people who don't like to talk to media somehow would agree to talk to me. Like the owner of SMC, Henry C. I had occasions of talking to him for hours. There was one time I talked to him from 5 p.m. up to like 8 or 9 p.m.
grabe.
We ate at 3 restaurants in the Podium. When it was newly open yung Podium,
Exactly.
he invited me over. I think they trust me because they have read that even the presidential candidate, si Bongbong 6 years ago, when he was running for vice president, and the others, even the opposition, all kinds of people. So maybe the trust, maybe they read that I'm not a dangerous person, siguro. Sometimes I ask critical questions. I would ask not usual questions, but maybe they like what they read. I'm fair, siguro. I'm fair.
Oo. Kitang-kita naman siguro na you're a very comfortable conversationalist, I guess, with anyone. Even here, I think you're very comfortable.
Thank you, thank you. Madaldal lang.
But I guess let's get back to your career
Yes.
as a newspaper columnist. No,
Yes.
you mentioned so many, I guess, engagements back when you were in Ateneo, in your university days. You were writing for the Gaidon, you were writing for Matanglawin, you were writing for the Manila Chronicle. I guess, can you take us through yung first moment that you're actually writing for a column? And parang how does that differ from now? Like, I just wanted to see if what the insight has been. Yeah.
I started actually writing when I was in high school for the high school paper of Grace Christian. That time it was called Grace Christian High School. I was writing already, and I was also writing letters to the editor at that time. I don't know now, hindi na yata uso masyado writing letters to the editor, to the newspapers. I would write a few letters to the editors. I would react to columns of people. I would even write columnists, and they would even reply to me. Sometimes they would even mention in their column na this guy wrote this and like that. I started writing when I was still a student because my mother loved writing. My mother was a Chinese language teacher, You know, in our Chinese, traditional Chinese culture, writing or literature is a very high art. Writing. Unfortunately, in our Philippine society and other modern societies, we don't value too much literature and writing. But in traditional Chinese civilization, I think writing is a very high, noble vocation. So my mother was a Chinese language teacher. She wanted me to be two things. At first, when I was a kid, she said, try to be a doctor, Wilson, when you grow up. I was grade school. Sabi ko, sorry, I don't have the aptitude for medicine yata. I'm not very good at biology and all these things. I'm not interested too much. Sabi niya, sige, be a novelist na lang. I was shocked. My mother told me to be a novelist. Imagine mo, my father was a businessman who died when I was 7. So all my life, I keep thinking someday I should learn to be a businessman like my dad, pero he passed away early. And my mother naman wanted me to be a novelist. Alam mo, sagot ko sa mother ko at that time when I was in grade school, hindi pa uso ang novels. Now, in the 21st century, there are more novels na published locally, diba, in the Philippines, more novels, and it's a industry. I told my mother, do you want me to starve? There are no full-time novelists in the Philippines. Because I told my mother as a grade school kid, we are not China, we are not Europe, we are not United States. In the US, in China, in Europe, there are people whose full-time 100% profession is writing fiction, short stories or novels. And they get paid, they earn money, they even become famous. They get movie versions of their novels, but not in the Philippines, because in the Philippines, you want to be a novelist, you have to be a professor in college, a journalist, advertising industry person. So I started writing because my mother encouraged me to write.
Uncle Wilson, I want to lock in one of the things that you mentioned. Sabi mo kanina, writing today is not as valued as before. I also remembered
in ancient times.
When my mom told me that she really aspired to become a poet, you know, in her later days, sabi niya, no?
Yes.
But then now, you know, she's a banker, you know, she's in the corporate world, well deep into it, no? I just want to ask, bakit hindi valued masyado ang writing in today's world? Would you have any insight to that? Or is it just because we're not as exposed to it as we'd want to?
That's a very good question. I think it's especially in the Philippines, we have not encouraged reading too much in the Philippines. Before the advent of internet, social media, there should have been a big market for reading books and newspapers, but there was not. Not too many people were reading. So in the Philippines, if you have a few thousand copies of your books sold, a few thousand copies, years ago, that's already considered a bestseller. In America, in China, Europe, kung no hundreds of thousands of millions of copies, hindi bestseller yan. So we have not encouraged the reading habit in the Philippines. But now that online, social media, entertainment, and internet has taken over most of the media, lalong wala ngayon ng reading habit. You know, like when you go to Asia, all over Asia, you go to China, you go to Japan, you go to Korea, you can see people in the subway now reading books. They would just read books. I remember in China one time, I was seated sa taxi. There was a book in front of the taxi driver. And I asked, whose book is this? Sabi ng taxi driver, that's my book. Tapos tinanong ko, why are you reading? I'm not questioning him why he was reading. Nag-wonder ako why a taxi driver would be reading a book. He told me, people who don't read are missing a lot. I was annoyed. We have not encouraged too much reading now.
Do you think, Uncle Wilson, that's correlated to the fact na walang masyadong public places where reading is, you know, encouraged? Like for example,
you're correct also.
Where do you see libraries in Metro Manila na you can just go into and have, you know, diba? Tahimik ka lang,
you're correct
ka.
Also. You're correct. Like even before the internet era, libraries should have been the best place for you to read, diba? In other countries, you have huge national libraries. Before the internet era, now there's an excuse kasi not everything, a lot of things are online. But even before the internet era, our National Library was so small and not very busy. So that's a challenge for writers, people who want to write. But now, the advantage among of writers, you have online. So the world is your readership, hopefully. Our leadership. That's the plus and minus.
If you think about like journalism or writers right today,
Yes.
do you think it's more dangerous now than before to be a writer, to be a journalist?
I think it is hopefully less dangerous now, hopefully. Because in the past, now everything is online, so everything you do is open to the public. So in a way, you are protected. If somebody mistreats you or doesn't treat you well, it's but dangerous in some sense because if you're a political writer, I think if you're in the politics field of writing or you're in the crime scene of writing or something, that has always been a dangerous field. Not always, in fairness, not always. And if you're a reporter sent to the front lines, to the war era, to the war areas or the rebellion areas, that would be dangerous. But in general, I don't think it's dangerous naman. I think in general, writing is exciting and colorful. Not so much dangerous, I think, because in the Philippines, I have not yet encountered anyone jailed for libel, in fairness. Some people just keep on writing all kinds of things. There have been libel cases by certain famous people, politicians, but I have not really read people being jailed for libel. I don't know good or bad yan.
Jose Rizal lang ata Uncle Wilson, no?
pero Uncle Wilson, I think, I guess what we want to ask also is that in your experience, since you write a lot about a lot of diverse topics, have you ever received any negative feedback to your column? In terms of, I mean, it doesn't even have to be to the point na death threat or something, diba? Pero parang,
yes, I know.
Oo.
Nagjo-joke lang sila. Like for example, the first time I ever met Chris Aquino was at the wake of the mother of the late Philippine star, columnist, and entertainment editor Ricky Lo. The mother's wake. So when I went in, I was there. Tapos sabi ni Ricky Lo sa akin, "Oh, Wilson, this is Chris Aquino. Chris, this is Wilson Lee Flores." Tapos tumingin si Chris sa likod. Nakita niya, I know Wilson. I always read his column even though he is often nasty at me. Tapos tumawa siya. Naging friends na kami ever since. Nagjo-joke siya kasi I used to make fun of her. Sabi ko, ang gulo-gulo naman ang buhay mo and everything. Nagjo-joke ako noon. I had this humor column kasi na sometimes people feel I'm criticizing them. Not always, I'm very harmless in general. Tapos I remember naman one time, the former President Fidel Ramos invited me over for lunch. Noong nagla-lunch kami, bigay siya sa akin ng coffee. Barako coffee daw na from the farm of the wife. Pero linagyan niya ng liquor. I'm not a liquor drinker. Something about XO something. Alam mo yan? XO type na liquor. Something linagyan niya ng brandy or whatever it is. Ako naman, di ako liquor drinker. I don't drink too much liquor. Pero I keep drinking and drinking all the coffee. Amis siya. Bakit daw okay ako? Tapos di ako nalalasing. Tapos, later, after our entire conversation, ang joke niya sa akin at that time, sabi niya, Wilson, alam mo kung di lang friend lang tayo, bakit mo ako linuloko? Sometimes I would make fun of him kasi noon. Sabi niya, kung di, tutulak na kita dito sa building. Nag-joke siya. I don't often criticize people. In fairness, when my former professor at Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo was president 9 years, I often made fun of her politics. And she was always very nice, never criticized me. But after the 9 years of her term as president, I wrote a very nice column na I keep making fun of her politics, controversial politics once in a while. But in fairness, she was a very good president economically. Then she called me up out of the blue, nagte-thank you sa akin. I don't generally criticize people too much. Sometimes lang. And if I do, I do it with humor sometimes.
And I think, Uncle Wilson, now naman gusto naming mag-focus in this unique thing that you have, no? I mentioned
Yes.
to Matt while we were researching you. I checked every child that you had, and I noticed you also have a Twitter account. Pero I told
Yes.
Matt, you know what, Matt? 80% or 90% ng pinopost ni Uncle Wilson is about this bakery. You know,
Ay,
and
oo
he
nga.
always
Sorry,
he
naging
always-
boring na yata. May
He always-
nag-complain sa akin. I have a friend nag-complain. Uy, naging boring ka na ngayon ha. Puro breads na lang.
exactly,
nga,
puro
lately,
bread,
lately.
diba? To our
Lately.
audience, no, what's so unique about Wilson Flores is that he's such a renowned columnist. He's also a real estate mogul. He's also a great
Hindi ba
businessman.
mogul ha? Ano,
Oh,
hindi pwedeng-
real estate entrepreneur, diba? Pero napapansin natin that he always talks about this bakery as the very first thing about Wilson Flores. Uncle Wilson, can you share to us what is your ties with Kamuning Bakery? Why are you still pushing forward with this bakery? And
Yes.
diba, you could have easily left this job, this passion, diba? Pero
Yes,
you're
yes.
still here. You're still pushing for it. You're still so proud of its 83-year-old heritage. Why is that?
Thank you. Because I bought it by accident. Actually, alam mo, I
By
bought
accident?
it because I love to read also. Yes, by accident, because when I was in Ateneo in college, there was this famous professor called Dr. Doreen Fernandez. Very famous professor.
Yeah.
And #1 food critic in the Philippines up to now. She
Yeah.
passed away na maybe 15, 20 years ago. She's still very legendary food critic. She used to write a column in the Philippine Daily Inquirer about foods. And she always mentions this oldest bakery in Quezon City called Kamuning Bakery, which was her favorite. She would go there to buy breads. And sabi niya, not only her, many ordinary people and some wealthy people, all kinds of people, including President Cory Aquino at that time, would personally buy breads there. And when I was in college, I went all the way there out of curiosity to buy breads. And then through the years, naging customer ako once in a while. I would pass by. Then suddenly, somebody wanted to sell it. Sabi ko, sayang. They wanted me to sell it as real estate. Sabi ko, if somebody buys this, they will just tear it up away and build something on it. So I bought it na lang and revived it because #1, I love history and I love good foods. Yun.
Grabe,
So
grabe.
I bought it and it's a fun business. I love to
Right.
eat it. And I
Right.
love history.
Parang ngayon naisip ko lang Uncle Wilson,
Yes.
ang dami ng French bakery. 'Di ba? Ang
Yes.
dami ng bread talk. Pero yet you still continue to say that Kamuning Bakery, is at its core, 'di ba? Parang
Thank you, thank you.
is there any special ties to that, no? Bakit
Because
why don't you just, sell it for
Yes,
another
A
franchise?
lot of people
di ba?
say that nga eh. Kasi I believe kasi, I love history, so fascinated ako. I bought it. I only know two famous customers before, Dr. Doreen Fernandez and Cory Aquino. When I bought it, I discovered there had been so many interesting stories with that bakery. So many famous customers from Don Alejandro Roses. There's a road in Quezon City called Don Alejandro Roses. He was the first customer and Suki, loyal customer. I believe kasi in any society or country, the history of people or community, you don't only find in museums or history books, also in the way people cook, the way people bake, and the way people eat. So it's like a museum of old breads and
Galing.
pastries.
Galing.
And I love to eat talaga. So I have an excuse to, I love to eat. So instead of real estate writing and real estate business, I want to go into the food business through this bakery. It's
Ganda.
not a very easy business, especially nowadays when you have wheat and flour prices going almost sky high
Exactly.
naman, almost.
Exactly.
And it's very difficult. But I love food kasi. I love good food. And I love history. I could eat many times a day. It doesn't look that way, no? I'm not very big.
Sana
But I
ganyan
love to
kami. Sana ganyan kami, Uncle Wilson. Kami kasi
You have to eat
lumalaki.
with us, with me.
Definitely. In one day.
Pero Uncle Wilson, I guess ayan na naman tayo with the pandemic,
Yes.
no? How has the pandemic, like, I guess, affected newspaper columnists or newspaper journalism in your eyes, in your experience?
That's a great question. I think the pandemic has hurt a lot of mainstream media entities worldwide, not only the Philippines, but worldwide, because newspapers essentially are businesses also. So when businesses are hard up worldwide, when there's economic uncertainty, even newspapers are hard hit. So that is a challenge for newspapers. Number two, also, there's a competition now more than ever from the online media, the social media, because everybody could be a newspaper, everybody could be their own columnist. So even the mainstream media is getting a lot of competition from non-traditional media, which is social media. So that's a headache. And for journalists and for columnists who love mainstream media, newspapers, we have to be up to date. Columnists have to have their own social media accounts also. So whenever I have a column, I would post on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook also to update people that there's a column coming, or I wrote this, it's coming out tomorrow. And also the challenge of the pandemic, alam mo, has restricted movement of people in 2 years. That is very difficult because you have to access people, you have to talk to people, and people are afraid to meet people during the pandemic. It's hard to interview people via, now it's okay, we have this Zoom, no? But Zoom is people you know, like I trust you, you trust me, okay yan. But if you don't know people, it's hard to bump into people by accident.
Yep.
Some of my best interviews are unscheduled interviews. Nakakachamba lang. I see them on a plane, I meet them in a restaurant. There was a party, somebody seated beside me, very colorful. Biglang I will just ask, and then it's an interview na. Sometimes that's a wonderful way to get stories. But the pandemic has restricted that. So now that we are coming out of the pandemic, I hope life would go back to normal and we would write more stories and get more interesting topics.
Well, yeah, I guess you've shared a few advice already on how people can get started. But I mean,
Yes.
is there anything, like, if for example they want to start their own newspaper column? I don't know.
Yes.
Can our listeners write to somewhere? Do you have any
Yes.
advice? I guess on any other advice that you can share with them, misconceptions, etc.
Yes, that's a good question also. The best way to write and to be able to write a column is to start writing somewhere, somehow. Luckily for people now in the 21st century, you don't have to wait for a newspaper to publish you first before you become published. Now you could already publish yourself via your blog, via Facebook, Instagram, and it's already a start. People may notice you. You can use that as reference in the future. It's like Justin Bieber. In the early times, wala pang social media. In order to become a singer, to be discovered, he has to apply with a recording company. He has to go to a studio, TV show to apply, di ba? To be able to be noticed. And may social media. He kept uploaded all his music lang. Na-discover na siya, di ba? So I would advise to all people who want to write, who love to write, just start writing online, blogs, anything, and then that's a start. And then I believe mainstream media still has its own advantages. Do not totally neglect mainstream media kasi some of the best in mainstream media like Philstar still has credibility. You can write to them. They have all their email addresses in public. You just write to their editors anything you want to write. You can just write a draft on an article, send it to them. If not, you can even propose articles to them, emailed. That's one thing I had not yet explored. We can, the good thing, you can even go abroad. There's no restriction anymore. I'll tell you, there was a time when I was in college. If I want to read the New York Times, Washington Post, or South China Morning Post of Hong Kong or something, you have to physically get a physical copy, di ba? When I was in college and high school, I had to go all the way to Makati to this library called Thomas Jefferson Library. I had to line up, leave my ID and everything. then go there and physically get a copy of New York Times or Washington Post to read these wonderful articles. And if you want to write to any of them, you have to send by postage stamp, di ba, letter, weeks pa to them, and then weeks for them to even answer back. Now, there is the magic of the internet. So being a writer now may be more competitive, but it's faster, easier. The world is our market for not only writing, but for anything because of the wonders of internet. I would recommend just keep on writing.
Uncle Wilson, you mentioned earlier,
Yes.
just do it, diba? Just write, diba?
Yes, just write it.
Just do it.
Natandaan ko in one of our episodes with historian Ambet Ocampo. Sabi
Uy,
niya,
kaibigan ko yan.
ayun, lahat naman kaibigan
Nice
mo,
guy,
Uncle
nice
Wilson, no? Parang
Nice guy.
sabi niya, Uncle Wilson, if you want to learn history, start by, checking out the history that's relevant to you, which is, for example, your family, your heritage,
Yes.
diba? Sa'yo naman,
Yeah.
Uncle Wilson, do you have any tips to our audience listening? Saan ka magsisimula? What will the things you will start with to write about? Any
Great,
specific thing?
that's a very good question. I would recommend the topics that are dear to your heart or that interest you a lot. For example, if you're a basketball fan, you love basketball, PBA, NBA, you start by writing what you like and know about. If you like science, you try to write about science. If you like economics, business, stock market, analyzing the economy, write for the business section of the newspapers or even magazines. There are magazines online now, like Entrepreneur Philippines and whatever. You can write for these online magazines. Any topic you like, start with something that you are passionate about, that you are interested about. That's the best way to enjoy writing.
Lance, when we started Project Offbeat for our fellow corporate professionals, our hope was to open up their perspectives to different careers and different insights that are not necessarily in like the corporate setup. So we wanted to open up their perspective and point of view. I guess our question here is, how do you think your specialization as a columnist or like a newspaper column writer, how do you think it can be applied to, I guess, the workplace or the marketplace? Or
That's a fantastic question. I'll tell you why. When I was invited years ago to speak to a group of students about writing in general, I said, it's not true you have to be a full-time journalist or columnist to write. I think everyone should learn to write somehow. Even if you're an engineer, even if you're a banker, even if you're a doctor, more so if you're a politician, if you know how to write well, or even just the basics of writing, you can go ahead better in your profession. I believe a doctor who writes well will become a better doctor. Definitely, I tell you, if you go into politics or government service, if you write well, you can become like Barack Obama. Magaling mambola. You know, he became famous first time because he wrote a nice book. It was something to do with hope and title. He wrote a very good, well-written book. Then it started his career. Kasi writing is actually expression of self. So what better way to improve yourself in your profession, whether you are engineer, businessman, any field, it makes you a better person, I believe. Alam mo, nowadays people don't write letters anymore. Hindi na uso yung writing letters on paper, di ba? But if you do it, it would do wonders. If you're courting someone, if you're asking something for your parents, you're saying sorry to your boss, if you write a nice handwritten letter, that's incomparable to anything. It's different from texting, from just verbal saying it. Writing is going to be useful for any profession. I believe so. Me personally, aside from writing, I went into real estate first at sales, in sales. And because of my writing, I somehow, people say I'm a good storyteller now. I like to talk to people. And the conversation with the prospect buyer, instead of 10 minutes only listening to you, it might become 30 minutes to 1 hour. So you
Ganda.
become a friend of that
Correct.
person.
Correct.
So writing is good for any profession.
Yeah.
It makes you a better professional in any field. I believe so. See, Julius Caesar, if you Google Julius Caesar, one of the greatest emperors of the Roman Empire,
Yep.
he is considered one of the greatest, if not the best writer in the Latin language. Magaling na writer.
Kaya nga, actually, napapaisip rin nga kami, Uncle Wilson, bakit hindi
Yes.
si Bonifacio o si Emilio Aguinaldo ang national hero natin? Bakit si
You're
Jose Rizal?
correct.
Di ba?
Because he writes a lot.
Exactly.
He wrote a lot.
Exactly.
He
And
wrote
we
very well.
still read everything that he writes today, no? So, siguro Uncle Wilson, we'd like to end yung
Yes.
first part natin by this question. Say you are facing a kid right now or a student right now,
Yes.
like us, no? And then sinabihan sila ng parents nila, walang pera sa writing, walang pera sa pagiging columnist, no? Anong sasabihin mo sa younger generation today na may interest to actually pursue writing, pursue being a columnist, but then is sort of discouraged by their parents, by their peers, kasi it doesn't make enough money?
That's a very good question. A very, very good question. Ako, in my case, try to do it. I don't want kids also to defy their parents. Parents are not always correct, but somehow we have to respect them and not make them too sad naman. So what I did, in my case, opposite naman. My mother was a little bit offbeat in that sense. She wanted me to be a novelist. Ako naman, since I had no father, I had no business, I kept thinking about the economic side of things, di ba? So I tried to balance it by doing two things at the same time. Ang good thing about writing, the very good thing about writing, it's like music. You don't need to do it 9 to 5 naman. So there's no clash. You can be a very good writer, full-time writer in your spare time after office work. Like you can do the work that your parents expect you 9 to 5, and there's no excuse. There's nighttime, there's weekend, there's holidays. We could still write. So that's the good thing about writing. It's not fixed. You don't have to like sit in an office 9 to 5 to be able to produce literary works and essays. That's the advantage of writing. That story of yours is very nice. You can ask Jose Marichan. I'll recommend to you, add him to your interview subject, because I remember he told me that story anecdote when he was starting to love music. When he was in college, he was doing all these music things, songwriting, singing in band and everything. His father was apprehensive. His father was a successful tycoon businessman. Tapos this eldest son wants to go into music. Sayang naman yung business niya, di ba? Do you know what the father did? The father went to this very classy hotel lobby with a restaurant, fancy restaurant, and then ate with Jose Marichana as a kid.
Wow.
And then in the middle of the intermission of the music number, di ba? There's a talented singer in front. Tinawag niya yun sa waiter. Pakitawag mo naman yung singer, papuntahin mo dito. Makipagkwentuhan sa amin for a few minutes. In front of the son, si Jose Marichan, tinanong niya, oy, kamusta ka? Magkano kinikita mo per month para ma-brainwash si Jose Marichan na there's no money in this.
Right.
Yun.
Grabe,
no?
no?
Pero ako personally, I would encourage everyone who wants to go into offbeat field of writing, not traditional corporate, or it's no conflict. You don't have to stop the corporate or whatever field you are doing. Even a doctor, even a dentist could do writing. Yun ang maganda about writing. It's not, you're not forced to write 9 o'clock a.m. to 5 p.m. But if you're a full-time journalist or a full-time novelist, I know of this guy. Who's this guy na very famous romance novelist in America with all these romance movies made from his novels? He came here. I was able to interview him. He writes 9 to 5.
Grabe,
That's his full-time job.
Right. Grabe,
You don't
no?
have to. You don't have to be 9 to 5 to write. So there's no excuse. There's no conflict. You can go ahead with your banking career. You can go ahead with your. I know it's difficult if you're a family or whatever. You can still write in your spare time.
Yeah.
Therapeutic, no, Matt? And
Therapeutic,
Uncle Wilson,
yeah.
no? It's you kind of reflect about your life and about your
Yes.
experiences when you write.
You
Sorry,
mentioned
go.
something I like very much. You can Google the word flow. There's a psychological
Flow.
condition called flow. FLOW. Alam mo, when I write a column, when I'm writing a column, very busy writing, parang I am in a sense of flow. When there's something happening
Correct.
to you, you
Correct.
don't care about what's happening in the world. Parang if a bomb explodes beside you, there's a wire behind you or something, a fire, parang it doesn't matter. Parang you lose sense of time and space. If you're writing, it's a
Wow.
relaxing. You said it's therapeutic for you. It's a way to relax. Kaya for people who want to explore and go into writing, that's a way to relax also. It's like people playing tennis, playing basketball, swimming. No need to clash with your 9 to 5 job.
Maybe last year I told Lance
Yes.
that I was writing about like reflections from college, and it's very
Yes.
therapeutic talaga. So just do it,
Diba?
guys. For all our listeners, just do it. Just start
Yes,
writing.
it's a way to express yourself, especially if you're too sad or angry or something. When you write about it, nawawala din, and you enjoy it. You enjoy writing.
Well said. Well said. Well,
Yes.
that brings us to a close of our Project Offbeat episode. Thanks for taking us off the beaten path, Uncle Wilson. Thank you
Yes.
so much.
Wilson lang, you can call me Wilson lang.
Can you let our listeners know where you are now and what you're excited about for the next few months or whatnot?
Yes, I'm right now thinking of what's something I have not yet done through the years. My editors in Philstar kept on reminding me, suggesting to me, I want to compile some of my best columns into books. I want to do that. And I want to write more poetry also. Do you know, when I was in college, I used to write a lot of poetry in English and Filipino. In the school papers and outside. I want to write fiction also because my mother, when I was in grade school, told me to write a novel. Someday soon, I hope I want to write a novel. Yun. And then I'm busy with also the Kamuning Bakery Cafe. I will invite both of you and your listeners to drink coffee with me anytime.
Thank you.
Definitely. My treat.
Thank you. Wilson.
Thank you.
Wilson.
Yes, thank you very much.
Baka Uncle Wilson, may liquor rin yung kape natin, ha?
Wala. Si Ramos, nakakatawa. Offered me coffee, cups and cups of coffee with liquor pala. I don't sell liquor. Right. I think we have a school across us, Kamuning Bakery. I want to sell red wine and beer, pero my accountant said, sir, may eskwelahan sa tapat mo. Drink moderately is not bad. Not too much.
Give us, how can our listeners get in contact with you if they ever want to ask you about your life as a newspaper columnist or even ask about your Kamuning Bakery as well?
Yes, or any topic under the sun that they want to ask about.
Yeah.
They could email me, of course, willsoonflourish@gmail.com. Sa Tagalog, ang ibig sabihin, malapit na mag-flourish @gmail.com. Also, I have Facebook, Wilson Lee Flores, also Instagram and Twitter. I have TikTok, but I have not yet started it. You can always Instagram me, Twitter, and Facebook. But also, I'm often also at Kamuning Bakery Cafe morning up to afternoon. Not always, but I'm often there. You are all welcome to drop by. And if you bump into me, I'll offer you coffee. No kidding. I'll offer you free brewed coffee. Especially to Lance and Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt, pakischedule na
nga. You have to visit, ha? No kidding.
Yes, definitely, Uncle Wilson. Yeah.
We will definitely now. And we always ask this as our last question for all of our Project Offbeat guests. In a few sentences, in your own words, what for you is taking the off-beaten path?
Taking the off-beaten path is not going through the expected normal or mainstream vocations. Going to the non-traditional paths like arts, like writing, which I think is not bad, which is also adventurous, exciting, and not to be afraid. I suggest not to be afraid of being offbeat in your path as a vocation. Everything is equally good. The things that are non-traditional are not always bad, are not always dangerous, not always risky. Maybe it doesn't look stable in the sense like corporate world and others, but there are always compensating benefits. There's always a plus and minus. If you sacrifice something, you go off it, you'd be surprised with a lot of good things you never expect to get out of it also. There's a Robert Frost point, di ba? About choosing the different path from the normal path. It's a great famous point. There's nothing wrong. There's no really right and wrong paths. The offbeat path is not wrong. It's exciting. It makes you unique. It makes you a better person also. I'm not saying corporate it's not good. Of course, it's very safe and good. But the offbeat path might be more meaningful to your life, might be the one you are meant to be in. Maybe it's your calling. Maybe you'd become a Nobel Prize winning writer in that field. Maybe you'd become a Emmy Award, Oscar Award winning actor somewhere.
Well, I hope Wilson inspired our listeners today to kind of take the off-beaten path as well. Thank you for listening to the show. If you liked our show, follow us as well on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube for exclusive content. That's at the Project Offbeat. See you in the next episode. And here's to taking the hashtag off-beaten path. Thank you again, Uncle Wilson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lance and Matt. Thank you, Tosha. Thank you very much.